Okay, so it is time for the end of the week reading vlog. It is the end of week 3 in March. Can't believe we're getting to the end. It has been a very interesting month, and I've already, excuse my voice, still not feeling the best, but it's not corona, it's just a cold. I've already eclipsed what I read last month in page numbers, and in books. So last month I read 7 books, and I've already read 7 books this month, and I do hope, to have read 10 books by the end of this month. So doing really well, and I've read so much already this week. I have read 3 books this week. I'm continuing on reading a book, and I've started another book. And then I've got, I think, one more to go after that one. So let's get into all the details about what I've been reading this week. Starting off with Mistborn's The Well of Ascension. This is the second book in the Mistborn series, and I'm doing pretty well actually with this one. So I'm currently up to page 558, and I literally just got there a minute ago. And I'm enjoying this book. I'm not enjoying it as much as the first book because there's not as much action that goes on in this book. It's much more of a politicking, kind of story. In saying that, I am enjoying the characters very much so. There's been a lot of character growth for a lot of the characters. There's a new character that's been introduced to this second book, and I'm absolutely loving her. She's an advisor. I won't say too much about it, but she's an advisor, and I do absolutely love her. We're learning so much about other characters that we didn't know in the first book, and so I do appreciate it. It is not character driven, it is plot driven, but at the same time it's just very, very different to the first one. If you have not read the Mistborn series, I'm not going to give away too much here, but it is a fantasy book that is very high, extremely high fantasy with a hard magic system. And that hard magic system is introduced, as well as the world building of this high fantasy world, in the first book. And because of that, there's just so much that we need to learn, as well as run alongside everything else that's going on. We know all this stuff coming into book 2, and it's more about the politicking side of things and character growth. It's fine. It's probably a 4-star read, but it's just not as action-packed as the first one, and I do miss that. But it's still a good book, though, and I'm not that far away from the end. Probably a good 200 pages or less away from the end, so I will definitely have this finished by this time next week when I do my monthly wrap-up, which I'm really looking forward to. Or my weekly and monthly, because this time I'm going to do both, a weekly and a monthly wrap-up. Yay, where last month I did not do that. So let's check out what I have read in order. First up, I have some pieces of paper in here, so I'll try and get rid of those. First up, I have Pool Boy. Now, this is a book by Michael Simmons. It is it's a contemporary. Forgot myself there. It's a contemporary by Michael Simmons, and I have reviewed this book already, so you can check that out in my reviews playlist. I end up giving this book 2 stars, but that's mainly because of something that happens at the end. This book, unlike Mistborn, is a character-driven book, and I don't like character-driven stories because it revolves more around the character themselves, and basically you are following them doing mundane day-to-day activities rather than this massive driving plot that's moving them forward, and I just didn't enjoy that. In saying that, the ending was absolutely amazing. I do recommend this to anyone who likes contemporary stories, although I do feel that there are some improvements that could be made to this book to make it even better than it was. To give the author, Michael Simmons, a bit of a break, it is the first book he ever did write, so maybe I'll read something else that he's written more recently, and maybe that will receive a higher rating from me. But I read this, and it received 2 stars, and that happened this week. The second book that I read this week was a middle grade horror, Goosebumps, My Hairiest Adventure by R.L. Stine. I did like this book for a couple of different reasons, but it did receive a 1 star from me. It probably should be a 1.5 star. I didn't love this book. I thought it was okay. And one thing that it had going for it was that this book was scarier than an adult horror that I read earlier this month, which a lot of people say is one of the most scary books out there. So that kind of surprised me, considering this is middle grade and that was a horror. In saying that, what disappointed me most about this book was the ending. There is the big moment, the climax. The climax that happens towards the end happens on the third last page. So we read the climax on the third last page. On the second last page is explained why the climax happened the way that it did, and then we have half a page left to wrap up the book. And I did not like that because I loved the climax, so I really felt that I was getting into this book 3 pages before the end, or 2.5 pages before the end, and I just found that really unsettling. I just wish there were a couple more chapters so we could continue on moving forward with this book, and I ended up giving this book 1 star, which is really interesting because the book read before this one received 3 stars, this received 2 stars, this received 1 star, so we were kind of going backwards this week. But then I had some more time to keep reading, and I put out a poll on Passion for Books, which is the Facebook group. I will link them in the description below, on 2 books for them to vote for. One was called High Voltage, and the other one was this one. A hefty fella, if I do say so myself, The Bizarre Stories of Bad Dreams by Stephen King. Now, earlier this month, I did read a Stephen King novel. It was Pet Sematary, and that's what I was referring to when I said that this book is scarier than one of the scariest books I've ever read. I'm referring to, or that they say is out there, that I did read, and I am referring to Pet Sematary with that. So I was talking to a friend of mine, and I told her, look, it just didn't scare me. And I was talking to her all the way through reading the book, saying, look, this book is just not scaring me. It's just not scaring me at all. When does it get scary? And it just never did. So she went with me to the library, and she picked out this book and said, look, read this. There are mini stories in this book, and because they are mini stories, they have to get right to the scary part really quickly. So hopefully this one will actually scare you. And I thought, okay, I'll give it a go. Excuse me. I did not think I was going to have time to actually get to this book, but then I finished these 2 books really quickly. So I did have time, put the vote up between this one and High Voltage, and everyone that voted on Passion for Books voted overwhelmingly for this one, and I mean overwhelmingly for this one, and so I ended up reading it. I believe I only just finished it last night, and I do believe I gave it 3 stars, because it was okay, but I have come to a bit of a conclusion about Stephen King. My own little conclusion from my own perspective, which is, if I'm going to read any more Stephen King, I am not going to read him for the horrific aspects of his book, because I just don't find them horrifying. To me, and maybe to me only, and I'm happy to stand alone with this, Stephen King is an author of contemporary style books that have a little sprinkling here or there of something you might think might come up in a horror. And so when viewed in that light, I do think Stephen King is an amazing writer, don't get me wrong. His plots generally are really good, and the majority of these books, there are 20 mini stories in here. It is just under a tome, 495 pages, and the majority of the books in here I really did love because the plots were amazing. But there was only like 1 or 2 stories out of all 20 that scared me even a little. One of them that received 5 stars, because I rated all the mini books individually and then came up with a rating system to give the overall rating. One of them particularly scared me, and I really did appreciate that. So that was pretty cool. But otherwise, I found the majority of the plots of the mini stories within this book to be pretty enjoyable to read. I just didn't find them scary at all. So, Stephen King as a horror writer, not a fan. Stephen King as, in my opinion, a contemporary writer with a sprinkling of horror here and there, love him, love his work, and the majority of these books were pretty good. So 3-star book, pretty good for me, considering that I started, Pet Sematary received 2 stars, this received 3 stars. So maybe if I read one more book by Stephen King, it might even get 4 stars. We'll see how we go. So, that's what I read this week, but wait, because there's still more to discuss, and we'll discuss that in just a moment. So, now that we've discussed what I have read this week, what am I going to be reading for the remainder of March? Well, I've now read 7 books, and by the end of this month, For the first time since the beginning of this channel, I'm going to read 10 books. This is going to involve a ton of reading to get to because I'm also doing a ton of videos next week. I have my midweek review, my end of week review, my April TBR, and my monthly wrap up to do as well. So I got a lot of things to do, as well as some reviews, and I'm also planning on doing a fun video, so there's a lot of things going on. But I have 3 books that I'm hoping to finish. 2 of them I have started, 1 of them I have not started yet. So, first of all, I'm planning on finishing Mistborn's The Well of Ascension. This will take me all the way through to the end of the month. So when I do my weekly wrap-up at the end of this week, I do not expect to be done with this book, but I expect to be incredibly close. Then, my final book from the genres draw that I was doing is this one, Heroes of Olympus, The Lost Hero by Rick Riordan. I hope I'm saying this correctly. Now, I did not read the top of this book, but this is a Percy Jackson's World book. The Percy Jackson's books are incredibly popular. I have not read them yet, but based off of what's going on with this book with me so far, there's a lot of flickering going on, I apologize. I would love to pick up the Percy Jackson series, at least the first book, and see how I go with that one. So I started reading this book. Sorry about the flickering, this is ridiculous. I started reading this book last night after I finished the Stephen King compilation book. Seriously, I keep forgetting what it's called. The Big Bad Book of Dreams. The Bizarre something, oh, just a moment. The Bizarre Stories of Bad Dreams. When I finished that one, I went straight onto this one because this is more than a tome. I think it's like 550 pages or something like that, so this is definitely a tome. Mistborn is pretty much a tome and a half, and then we have the other book that I need to read. So I started reading this one last night just to try and get myself as ahead as I possibly can, and I tell you what, the first 15 pages were so incredibly boring. I was not enjoying my read at all. I said to myself, I'll get through page 16, but if I'm still bored by the end of page 16, I am going to DNF this book, and I'll just pick up something else to make my 8th book that I read. Well, I guess Mr. Riordan heard me when I said that, because from page 16 onwards, this book is amazing. You guys, I can't say that any more emphatically than I am right now. This book is incredible. It just has a terrible start. The beginning is so mundane for a fantasy story, and I just did not appreciate it at all. But ever since those first 16 pages, it has been incredible. There's not really a lot I can say other than the fact that there are these 3 children who are going on a camp, 3 children that are going on they've gone on a bus tour to see the Grand Canyon, and while they're there, 3 of them are picked up by a flying carriage, horse and carriage, and taken away off to another camp, and that camp is a fantastical elemented camp, if that makes sense. So I don't want to say what the camp's about, but it's not a camp for humans, let's put it that way. And oh my god, this camp is incredible. I love what they have built there, and I'm loving the world building of this camp. Unfortunately, it seems like our 3 protagonists are going to be vacating the camp very soon because they've got something they have to go and do, and I just don't want to leave the camp because it's giving me major Divergent flashbacks, and I love Divergent. So yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that. No spoilers at all with this. The review's going to be interesting, that's for sure. But I'm loving this book. And so yeah, I'm basically spending my time going back and forth between Well of Ascension and the Heroes of Olympus, The Lost Hero. I just call this Olympus to keep it short in my mind. But yeah, between Well of Ascension and Olympus is how I'm spending my time at the moment. And they're both good reads. This one, not as good as book 1, but it's still a 4-star read. This one is probably going to get 5 stars if it keeps going the way that it's going, which is really fantastic considering that this week I read 1 1-star book, 1 2-star book, and 1 3-star book. If this is a 5-star book, what a great way it will be to end the month. The final book that I'm going to be reading this month, forgive the cover, I'm not a fan of the cover, and I need that to be known because I prefer the cover of the version of part 1 that I read is the final bookend of this month. When I did my March TBR, I said there were 2 bookends. Mistborn's Well of Ascension would be the beginning bookend, and then there would be this one. Again, please forgive the cover. I don't like this cover at all. It's just nothing against the artistry of the cover, but I love number 1, how it had the Roman numeral on it, and so if I can find the Roman numeral version of this book, I will replace this book and then give this one away. But anyway, this is book 2 in the Vampire Academy. It is Frostbite by Rochelle Mead. I have not begun this book. I will not be beginning this book until I finish this one, but hopefully by Wednesday I will have either started this or I'll be close to starting it anyway. We will see how we go. So that is where we are at for this week. I am 558 pages into this book, and it's so far a 4-star book. I read Pool Boy and gave it 2 stars. I read Goosebumps, My Hairiest Adventure and gave it 1 star. And I read Stephen King's The Bizarre Stories of Bad Dreams and gave this compilation 3 stars. For the remainder of this week, I am going to read Mistborn's The Well of Ascension, Olympus, and Frostbite Volume 2 in the Vampire Academy series. And that is where I'm going to leave it. If you have any comments, thoughts, and or questions, please do not hesitate to let me know in the comments area below. If you would like to vote for my April TBR, you may do so by joining Passion for Books, which is a group on Facebook. I have the link in the description below, so feel free to check that out as well. And thank you to everyone who has voted so far. It looks like I'm going to have an interesting month next month. And also, when I do my April TBR, you'll find out what my plan is for April. I hope that my plan can stay intact. I have a plan for April and a plan for May. I don't know if the April one is going to go ahead or not. It's relying on a delivery of books that are coming in that I've ordered online that I've not received yet, but owing to the coronavirus pandemic, I may not receive those books. If I don't, I'm going to switch my plans. The plan I had for May will become my plan for April, and my plan for April will become the plan for May. Hopefully I get them by May if I don't get them beforehand. But otherwise, let's leave that there. Letting you guys go. Peace, blessings, and so much love. Mwah. Happy reading to all of you, and I'll see you all again next time. Bye.